Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Talent Collective session. We have a very, very special guest who we've had as a guest before, and very excited to have her back. Brianna is just phenomenal. She is a talent acquisition professional who's been in the business for many years, and now she also does recruiting, but runs a training company, training program for recruiters, both agency, internal, and really everything in between. And as you can see from today's session title, it's not just about the actual skills of how to do your job, but also how to manage all of the things that go with your job. And one of those things I think all recruiters can relate very well to is getting overwhelmed. So I think even if you're not a recruiter or in the TA or HR space, today's session is going to be extremely valuable. So really, really excited to pass it over to Brianna Rooney right now. So Brianna, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Actually, I myself am having a day. It's more of an entrepreneur IRS issue day. I won't dig into that, but I will tell you I'm holding my little special gem. And so we all have days, we all have moments, hours, stuff like that. So it was actually interesting me coming in today. Kate, who I work with, I was telling her about today, and she's like, what a perfect day for you to do a webinar on how not to be overwhelmed. I'm like, I'm here for this. I'm here for this. And on a side note, and Krista, I don't know if you want to do this or how you would do this, but I definitely focused on still kind of being this like life thing, but more focused on recruiters. So like the actual practical tips are on recruiters. But on a side note, I kind of want to do it as a woman, as a parent, as a sister, a daughter, all these things, because it would be a slightly different webinar that I think that some people need, because it really blends with personal and business blends every day. I think the times where we're like, don't bring personal into work, it just doesn't exist. Like, I think when we did that cutoff, we did ourselves a disservice. And well, I'm sure other good things came from COVID, I guess, but one of the good things did come with, we started talking about it. We started saying like, hey, life is hard, work is hard, this sucks. Okay. So like, we should talk about it. Our managers should talk about it. If you are a manager, you should talk about it. Not that you have to dig deep into work, because not everyone's comfortable with that. But I will say that both sides affect each other. And I think that we should talk about it. So let me start sharing, and I'll go probably in and out of sharing, but this tends to be anything where you talk about mindset tends to be a very emotional journey. Sometimes it feels like that for me. So maybe I'll get emotional during this one. But I really ask that you be very vulnerable and be very real. And let's go for it. Here we go. All right. I always think it's funny when I go from Google Meets to Zoom. So we'll see how that goes. Let me move you guys over here. Okay. Got to be versatile. Here we are. All right. Everyone can see that, right? Are we good? Cool. I'm going to move you guys over here. All right. Here we go. Yeah, so that's my funny picture, because it is overwhelming, right? So my hopefully promise to you is, and Kate, do me a favor, if ever I'm like not sharing or things are getting weird, just chime in. By the end of this workshop, I'm hoping that we can transform the thoughts of being overwhelmed into more of like opportunities, into what's actually going on and why are we feeling overwhelmed, and can we flip this as a positive? Because I think that, again, being in recruiting or just being in life in general, you have to be a constant spin doctor in order to do, I think, really well. So you need to learn how to prioritize, right? How do we prevent burnout? Is it possible? In the recruiting world, we're running leaner and leaner and leaner, right? So how do we still do our jobs with a smile on this face? And then how do we communicate effectively? And then think about, I put peak seasons. Everyone's different as far as, I would say, when they're really busy. So I would love in the comments to know, is this season busier for you, or is it really slow? From an agency perspective, this feels pretty peak for me because I work with a lot of startups and a lot of those are, VC backed, and they lose certain amounts of funding if they don't spend it to hiring by the end of the year. So I actually am quite busy right now, and clients sometimes even raise my fee because it's so important for them to do this. So again, the peak seasons will come and go, but there's ways to communicate throughout. So. All right. As I kind of started to say is I love interaction. I love vulnerability. I think that's how we really get to do this, how we really get to be fun, how we, are a community. What's really cool about what Talent Collective is doing and continues to do every day is build a community, is build a safe place, is build somewhere where you can learn from each other, you can bounce ideas from each other, you can have a shoulder to cry on. And then I have on here, make some money. And some people might say this is an agency versus internal mentality. I'm going to fight back on that. And I think as women, we need to talk about money more because, although we can love what we do, I bet you there's other things that we would maybe volunteer for if we didn't need money. So I think money is just the vessel that gets you to do all the things that you want to go do, and who you want to do them with. All right. Frustrated. Let's talk about it. So here we go. What are our current work stressors? Please put in the chat, is it high volume, tight deadlines? Is it repetitive manual tasks that get you just like, no, thank you? I think of that as admin work. Competitive market pressures. So that can mean a few different things, depending on like what company you're with. Unpredictable candidate decisions. I know that can be hard. I know unpredictable company decisions. I was hit with one of those last night where I had someone go to the final rounds with just the CEO, and it's a bigger company, so that should be, a win. And that person was not interested in this candidate that everyone else likes. So that's hard for me as a human being because one, I'm not getting that close, right? But two, I've now developed this really great relationship with this candidate and also the team itself. And so there's a lot of like hard emotions there, right? Or then E, remote work or work-life balance. What are we seeing? What are we seeing? Let me go to this chat right here.
Mostly B's, but pretty mixed.
Mostly B's. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. I actually would have thought A, but now I'm more intrigued. Okay. So now I'm curious, on a side note, is anyone using any type of tools or any type of AI to help with B? Because that's where like my head goes for sure. Okay, cool. So let's move on. Let's talk about data because, well, data wins every war. 82% of recruiters report that they feel overworked by management, unrealistic deadlines, setup. So, I mean, if you hear me on that one, if you agree with this, always put this in the chat. Let's have some fun. That's a pretty high percentage, I would feel. And then what I guess I would want to dig on is what's overworked, right? Is it unrealistic rec loads? Are we needing help with scheduling and now we're doing full cycle? Does that feel really hard? Do we have multiple hiring managers? That's hard to, keep up with. Is there too many meetings? So there's all these things, right? 43% of recruiters cite burnout from handling repetitive and manual tasks. So you who chose B, this actually is in the stat: data entry, screening, scheduling. So that's pretty interesting. And then nearly half of recruiters report insufficient budgets and lack of hiring resources. So I think that a lot of people can feel that for sure. Budgets are hard. They want us to do more with less. So we can really dig into efficiencies, but that's not what this is about, because here's the thing. You can only control what you can control. And that's something that I got to tell you from a control freak is really difficult. Is anyone else a control freak up in here? Put that in there because let's bond over that. But I will say, so one of the most powerful things I have gotten, I don't know if anyone else in this room has, I got emotional intelligence training a few years back. And I got to tell you, I am absolutely getting that for my kids. I try to do that with them every single day. It was a total game changer for me because I was realizing that I was triggered by all sorts of things that was completely out of my control. And what I realized is when you're triggered, you're not naturally on your A game, you're on your B or C game, and you're letting like all of this free rent in your head live on. And that's just not something that works, right? Or it's definitely not sustainable. Okay. So here we go. This is fun for me. What comes to mind when you hear the word overwhelmed? Please put this in the chat. What do you think about? Before I move on, what do you think about? Overwhelmed. It has a very, very negative connotation, right? Too much to do, not enough time, too many decisions. Thank you. Decision fatigue. I don't think it's talked about enough. Drinking from the fire hose, curl up in a corner and cry, right? Let's add that. Love that. Yep. Overstimulated. Oh, that's interesting. I think of like my kids on watching TV. Overstimulated. I like that. Yeah. Prioritize when everything is a priority. Ooh, okay, let's work through this. Here we go. I added something today, and I'll tell you why. So for me, I think of mental fog, decision paralysis, actually. So I decided, why don't I look up the definition of overwhelm? And here's what's funny, just a little background. I told you today how I got my little thing that I'm holding because I'm having a day. I changed a lot of my presentation today because I was having a day. This was my outlet to not feel overwhelmed, to start breathing, right? So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, so what's the actual definition? Some is negative, some's actually really positive. Defeating, meaning like we're winning battles. We're winning battles when we're overwhelmed. You are having a strong emotional effect. That to me is a very positive thing. You're overpowering, you're too strong, like I am woman, hear me roar. So this can definitely be changed, okay? How I change this is I say I'm whelmed. And I think I have to give credit to Kate. Kate, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you thought of this. I was telling Kate a story about, well, just put it on blast, my ex-husband actually. And I was really annoyed because I came home excited from work. He's like, how was your day? And I'm like, oh my God, I've got all this stuff. He's like, wow, you sound really overwhelmed. So he took my excitement and decided that I was overwhelmed. And naturally, we're taught that overwhelmed is a negative thing, right? And I was really bothered by this. I'm like, no, I'm not overwhelmed. I'm excited. I got all these things to do. He's like, careful of burnout. Like it was just so much negativity that I felt like I was, fighting so I was telling her this story and she's like, we just need to change the word. You're whelmed, So if ever I told him I was overwhelmed, he would want to like hug me and, console me, which is like, no, I want like a high five, right? So if you look at this as being whelmed, is showing that you're pushing to the limits, that you're actually in growth stage. So I look at it like this. I work out a lot. And if I'm not sweating or if I'm not sore the next day, I didn't push myself out of my comfort zone. So I look at as whelmed as I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone, which means my butt's getting nicer and my my abs are getting smaller. So that's how I look at that. That's how I try to think of like whelmed. I'm looking at it as a changing of opportunities. Something when I first started, when I opened up my own company 17 years ago, I had a business partner at the time. And he always told me that if we're not pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, then we're not doing our best work. And so I just try to like embrace this as opportunities. How do I become more efficient to keep my whelmed being sustainable? So I think that's what's really important is sustaining this. Okay, so naturally we have to focus. By the way, focusing is difficult. Does anyone else have trouble focusing? Something I realized recently, so I would always say, like, if I were going to say one thing about me business-wise, I would say that my work ethic is extremely strong, extremely strong. However, I recently realized that my discipline isn't always strong. And I thought of those as like hand in hand, where I'm like, oh my God, do I not have like a strong work ethic anymore? No, actually, my discipline is being tested. So once I realized those are two different things, I was able to have what I call brutal focus. And we'll go over that in a couple more slides. So the important thing is batching your time. Now, here's the thing. There's so many different hacks on how to balance your time and not feel whelmed. you have to do what's right for you. I'm going to go over a couple of things that have either worked for me or worked for other people that I coach, because like I said, there is no like one way. We just have to figure out how to set up things, how to set up like uh-oh moments. So the way that I do that is by automated reminders. I have so many reminders, so many things on my calendars, so many alerts on my watch, and that keeps me sane. But you might be thinking, oh my God, if like my alarms go off, I'm going to go crazy and now I'm going to feel whelmed. So again, do what works for you. Some people like to plan out their entire week. I don't know. All I think is when I say brutal focus, I want you to focus on what moves the needle most for you and your business, or you with your company. High impact, time sensitive. What is something that you could do later? Here's the thing though. Just because you could do later, are you going to think about this thing all day? And if you think about something all day, then guess what? You're not on your A game, which means you have to start thinking about, for example, if you work from home, and by the way, this is the reason why I don't work from home with this story. But if you work from home and you're like, oh my God, I have to do the laundry right now. Like I'm thinking about it, but nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to sit at my desk because I have other things to do. But if you're constantly being like, I just really want to get the laundry done, go do the laundry. Okay. Go do what serves you, because if you are not focused, you are not productive. All right. So here's the matrix, and this is pretty organized. So from a non-organized person, here's something organized. I have to essentially think about what I need to tackle first. Okay. So for example, what would I need to tackle first? Well, I would say an offer. If I see an offer that I have to, give to my candidate, 100%, that's my main job. So think about in your world, what is your main job? If you were to say, and you might say, I have 10 jobs, I have 20 jobs, but think about when it comes to the time where I don't want to say you're being judged, but it's a performance review, because that's what those are, right? When it comes to your performance review, what would be like this big shining star that you would get? You would get the sticker because you did this one thing really well. You hit this one goal, which is why you have to have lots of different goals. So you have your mega goal, right? And then you have your daily goals, which is your micro goals. So think of it like that. What is like the one thing that you have to do? So here's your one goal. So what are all the tasks working backwards, your micro goals, that need to be done in order to hit this? Okay. So scheduling updates, candidate screens, candidate experience, think about stuff like that. Now think about, well, is admin work, this is a fight, is admin work low priority or high priority? And I think you have to ask yourself, that depends on your role, and it depends on how you work up here, because your main thing is focus. Now, in this little thing here, the non-important stuff is interruptions and distractions. So only you know truly what you get distracted by. If I see Pinterest, like during the holidays, which is now, my Pinterest is a distraction to me. Okay. So I allow myself during lunch is when I get to look at my Pinterest. Otherwise I'm gone. Right. So think about what's your distractions. Is it Slack? Slack's a giant distraction. So that's something that you have to make sure. And here's the thing, here's the funny thing. Slack was used to make you more efficient. However, I like to say that sometimes the stuff that's supposed to work doesn't work like you need it to, because you are always on it. Online shopping, 100%. Etsy gets me every time, okay? Which is where the Pinterest comes from. So you have to make sure that you time yourself. Hold on. So here we go. Let me go to the next slide real quick. So how can you delegate stuff? How can you use your colleagues? How can you use your recruitment software in the best of its ability? Okay. I will tell you. So let's get to that. Before we answer, probably shouldn't have gotten to this one. How we prioritize our business goals and focus on efforts is really goes back to what works for you and your team. So I'm going to get to actual strategies a little bit later on, but I want to hear more on what's other work distractions that you feel are not supposed to be distractions. They're supposed to help you. One comes to mind is meetings. Technically, meetings are supposed to help you, right? But what does that do? What can meetings do? Meetings can distract you, get you off task. Sometimes people get anxiety over meetings because they're like, oh my God, I have to report on something. I have to talk. Not everybody likes to be seen, even in recruiting. Some like to do the behind the scenes stuff, and that's totally fine. So think about what would stop you. What gets you off track? I would even say maybe even the gossip in Slack can get you off track. So I really want you, and then we're going to get to this also later, is I really want you to really think what gets you off track, even if it's for 5 minutes, because studies show that it takes 15 minutes to switch tasks. So just think about that. All right, here we go. Who has a problem saying no and without guilt? We have an A, which is yes, B, that sometimes, and C, not a problem. I want to know. I will tell you, I have a huge problem with saying no without guilt. Huge. So Sarah, I think you should run this webinar here. You have no problem. I want to hear. I want to hear. Love it. Okay. I actually came up with some ways to say no and take back control. So when I was looking into, well, first of all, guilt's its own separate thing, not for this webinar, but it's definitely, it will attack the mindset of stuff. I definitely deal with guilt as well. So, but when I realized that when I say no, I take back control. And as a control freak, that makes me happy. Okay. What it also does is it brings me confidence. It makes me feel good. And it makes me know that as I'm like sitting up taller, it makes me know that I matter. My time matters. And as someone wise has told me, I am worthy of receiving. Okay. So here's some things. Thank you so much for thinking of me. Right now, I have too much on my plate to take this on and give it the attention it deserves. So I'm not going to read all of these. You can have these for sure and use them however you want. But I really want you to say no at least once today. Okay, maybe no every day, but at least once today. And I want you to take a step back and see how you feel. I'm sure at first you're going to feel guilty. Okay. But I need you to say you have the confidence to not feel guilty. I have this issue, and this is Krista, what I was talking about. This could be definitely put on a personal pedestal here, but I'm going to focus on work. But it's really difficult, especially because for me, I love doing all things recruiting, all topics. Like I get really jazzed, I get really excited. So I'm constantly saying yes to things that I don't have time for. And what happens is now I'm in a bind and I'm now having to ask for help, which of course I don't, right? Because I feel, well, I took this on. This is my responsibility. Now I'm underwater. Now I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling whelmed, right? So now I'm like kind of going down this road that I shouldn't be going on because I should have just said no. I should have said no and took back control and know that my time's just as valuable as theirs. That's what's really important. And here's the thing, your time is just as valuable no matter what your title, no matter what your seniority. It does not matter. Your time is just as valuable as mine, so on and so forth. Okay. So if you have trouble with this, write a post-it. Okay. Write a post-it. I actually have the whole I am worthy of receiving, okay, as a post-it, because I struggle with it. I give a lot of help and I don't ask for help in return. And I should. So here's ways to say no. And actually, one more thing, what helped me, so with my coach, we were talking through this, right? And she says, look, I know you like to give back. I know you like to do all of these things, right? So I don't want to take away from things you enjoy doing. However, how about you put a limit on how many times you say yes? So for me, depending on what it is, I get to say yes 3 times a week with work. And it makes me feel good. And I honestly keep myself accountable. And that's the discipline you need with yourself. All right, here we go. Whew, brutal focus. Once I heard the term brutal focus, I was like, I got this. Okay. What do I need to accomplish? What do I want to accomplish? In my opinion, those are two different things depending on your role, right? What's non-negotiable? What can I push out? What can I not? You know, so definitely look at your schedules, look at the things that you have to do, and really think about that. Okay. So if anyone wants to share, what would be an example of a non-negotiable versus negotiable? So as what I put here was essentially things that I actually do. So I set a timer for all sorts of stuff. And as you see here, I capped your workday at 6 hours. Okay. I want to know who in here works more than 6 hours? Lunches don't count. Okay. Who actually works more than 6 hours? I want to know. And then maybe we'll have a chat. But there's tons of studies that show that actually a 4-hour day is more efficient. And here's the thing, and here's where we have to be honest with ourselves. How many hours are we actually on our A game a day? And how many hours data-wise does that make sense? So I will say the year that I realized efficiency was actually the year that I had my son, my first son. I only have one son, but I have 2 kids. He's 10. So I figured this out 10 years ago. I was running a company. I did absolutely everything. I was also running full desk. So I did clients, I did candidates, I did payroll, I was HR, I did all of these things, right? And so I was like, oh my God, I now have a little baby. So priorities change, right? And I couldn't find anyone to watch this adorable thing on Fridays. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I have a schedule now with daycare and I have Fridays that I have to stay home. I was freaking out. So I realized efficiency then because I didn't have a choice. That's what's really cool. When you don't have a choice, you actually get to see what you can accomplish and what you can focus on. So it would be really interesting if you today or next week or whenever you can, you give yourself a 4-hour work day and then you go reward yourself afterwards. And I want to know if you did better, more work, did better. That doesn't even make sense. If you did better work in those 4 hours than you typically do. I'd be interested. So here's what I do. I return emails, in-mails first thing in the morning throughout the day, depending on importance. And I save the ones that I feel are not as important, or I should say time sensitive. I do those in the afternoon. I'm a morning person. So that's something else that you have to think about. When do you feel your best? When are you on point? In the morning is for me. So the afternoon, when maybe I don't need as much brain power, I can respond to those other maybe not time sensitive emails or in-mails. Okay. Sourcing. I love jamming on sourcing. Sourcing is one of my most favorite things to do. I will do them in 30 to 45 minute increments. Depending on that, will be like 2 to 3 times a day, depending on my rec load, depending on my response rate, right? Like these things change. Admin, again, I will do in the afternoon. In my opinion, is not important for a lot of things I do. And sometimes I actually batch it. So I'll only do my admin work sometimes once a week, I'll be honest, but I try to do it every other day so it doesn't feel super heavy. And it's just, again, it just depends on what I need to do. Intake calls, I do engineering, so I'm not doing a ton of intake calls typically. I'll do perhaps 3 a day because my KPIs are a little bit different. I'm sending 6 to 9 really great people a week. But now here's the thing. Regardless of what your rec load is and how many intake calls you do, what would be interesting is how many phone calls had brutal focus, because a lot of people are fake busy. I think I could do a whole webinar on fake busy. Okay. Admit to yourselves in the chat, how many of you have been caught being fake busy? We all do it, right? Here's the definition of fake busy. You get on an intake call with someone, that doesn't really fit what you're looking for, but you know what? You're trying to find the exception to the rule. Not that person's not the rule. Now you might be saying, well, but there's so many exceptions to the rule. But my question to you is there? Is there that many exceptions to the rule? So that would be fake busy. Fake busy would also be mindlessly reaching out to candidates and again, not actually looking at their profiles. There's all sorts of stuff. Meetings that could have been a Loom video or a quick Slack. That's fake busy. So think about those things. All right, another thing, and this is agency life. So if you need to do biz dev, I do that 45 minutes, 2 times a day. If I'm super, super, super busy and swamped, right, then I can drop this to maybe 1 to 2 times every other week, depending on what works for me. Potential client calls. So this also might be hiring manager calls. 30 minutes is super sufficient. I might even do 15 minutes. I think agendas are really important because that's the brutal focus. So essentially, I don't like to go into a meeting, just like how you saw at the beginning of the webinar. I showed you what I was responsible for. Like, this is my KPI. So although I'm not a giant fan of KPIs because I feel like they were put in place for perhaps the underachievers, the ones that need the help. But I still think holding yourself accountable is what I mean by KPIs. So I'm accountable to what I put in the beginning. And I wanted to make sure that as I was going through this slide deck, that this is going to do what I said it was going to do. That's what I mean by that. Okay. So every time I get on the call with a hiring manager, if I'm done, like, let's just say we booked 30 minutes and we're done in 15, 20, we get time back. Like, I definitely encourage you to get time back. Now, on a side note, if you could use those 10 minutes to bond a little bit more and you think that's efficient, that will be efficient like later on, by all means. Remember, we're not looking for that shiny penny. We don't need like new stuff all the time. We also need to think about sustainability and future stuff. Another thing that is really, really, really important, and I hope you all do, and I want to know about it, is reading industry news. I actually start my day with industry news. I put it on the bottom, but in theory, you might say, well, this isn't important, right? It's not time sensitive, so I should leave it for later. But my fight on that is it inspires me and gets me pumped for my day. It puts me on my A+ game, okay? So that's why I actually say it is time sensitive for me. So who reads industry news? What are we reading? Because this helps. Remember, Talent Collective's here to have a community, right? So let's talk this through. I love Morning Brew. Morning Brew has a few. They have the HR one and they have tech, and also just the regular one. Morning Brew is probably my favorite, but I also like the snacks from Robinhood and CV Insights. That's super exciting for me. So, all right, let's go on. By the way, if you have any questions, please put them here. We'll get to them for sure. Am I doing on time? I'm doing pretty good. Okay, so practical techniques. We're also going to do one. So, but I'll talk about a few of these things. And again, these are all things that you figure out what works for you. Daily brain dump. Begin each day with a 5-minute brain dump of everything you need to do. Some people like to do this on a weekly basis, but essentially, like, what you don't want is to kind of spend up in your mind being like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that, da, da, da. And all of a sudden you're almost like doing these like circles or roller coaster in your mind. And then there's like no accountability. So the reason why, like, either put it on your phone, type it out, write it out. I've got all sorts of notes that I like to do, Post-its, whatever works for you, get it all out, because then you're going to look at this list and you're going to be like, okay, let's jam on these things, right? And you're going to see what you need to prioritize and what maybe you could even push to next week, because how cool is that? I love pushing things to the next week. Okay, or there's also a 25-5 rule, which is work and focus 25-minute intervals. I do 30, but what I've actually been doing, and my little puppy is here. Let's see if you can see her. Yeah, kind of. There she is. But so what I do now is, because I was finding myself definitely doing the intervals, but then I was finding fake busy work happening. And by fake busy, maybe a Pinterest. So I was finding that I wasn't using my downtime efficiently, and that I wasn't then going right back into tasks. So what I do now is I actually bring my dog to work because, well, she's got to go out, right? She needs a walk. So my 5 rule is I take her on a walk, and it doesn't even have to be far, right? It's literally like 3 or 4 minutes. She's happy, I'm happy, I come back, I'm refreshed. For me, I think of my best ideas when I'm active. So that's actually when I manifest. I would love to know, does anyone manifest here? So I do lots of affirmations and manifesting, and I realized I wasn't able to like meditate on them because I wasn't able to really calm down. I'm not a very calm individual, as you might be able to tell. So what was really exciting for me is I realized, wait a minute, I can manifest and calm down my mind when I work out. So Orange Theory every morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, is when I have all of my amazing ideas and I feel very like at peace and I'm just jamming. Right. So the same kind of mentality and recharge comes when I take my dog for a walk. So that works for me, but definitely you need breaks. Okay. Regular check-ins, and this is going to help with the journal. So it kind of goes hand in hand, but you need to know what your stressors are. So remember what we talked about in the beginning, like what happens when you're feeling whelmed. So if I'm super stressed, like literally, like I'm trying to like, I'm not today stress, I will twitch. And I'm like, okay, let's have a reset. Why is my eye twitching? What's going on? Or why do I have anxiety? And it's not, what's good is not to suppress these feelings. It's to figure them out. Where are they coming from? Now, if you're like most people, you might think, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for myself. I have to do 6 million things. I have a family, I have kids, I have this, I have that. Like there's so many reasons why taking care of you is literally the most important thing you could ever do. Always think about the airplane rule. They tell you to put on your mask first. Okay. I will say that until I'm like blue in the face. Put your mask on first. And then the way I do this, a game changer for me was journaling. After I sold my company, I got hit with imposter syndrome. No one tells you what it's like to hit a level of success you weren't prepared for. That's another webinar. But what happened is I started doing this growth and success journal, and I decided that I was going to put my goals. I was going to have goals in every sector of my life, because remember what we talked about in the beginning as well was personal and professional are intertwined. And unless you're a robot, you're going to disagree, right? So I decided every sector of my life needed goals, needed things that I needed to work on, right? Like nobody's perfect. I always want to push the limits. You never stop learning. You never stop growing. So I journal these small wins in every sector of my life. And I think that that's a really cool thing to do, because now if I'm feeling away at work, I can look back and be like, oh, cool. Killing it personally, right? Hey, kids' costumes on point. If I'm like having a day with my kids at home, I get to say, oh, close the deal this week. Yay for me. Or, hey, you know what? Made a really great business connection, whatever it is, right? So these are different practical ways to avoid burnout. Would love to know though in the chat, does anyone do anything different? All right. I had to put something in the holiday recruitment season. So a lot of internals for sure are maybe not as busy during November and December, but fight me here. So there's always going to be some type of year where you're not as busy, right? So what are you going to be doing? Now, we don't want to completely shut down. So you can, nurture your pipeline. You can strategic plan for next year. You can get all your messages together. Keep in mind, recruiters are always brand ambassadors. So we always have to have great messaging. We can start scheduling posts on LinkedIn. We actually have the time to do the stuff that we always felt busy for, which is really cool, right? But here's the thing. We don't want to use this time to procrastinate on stuff, because all of a sudden we're going to be hit with last minute stress. And that's what is just the worst, right? So you want to talk to candidates, you want to manage expectations. We want to make sure that we're not feeling extra whelmed during the holiday season, because let's be honest, we should be spending that more wisely. And that's like with our family, with our friends. Or whatever else you like to do. Maybe you like to travel alone. But this is just kind of a side note here. I think what's really cool too is to think about what your next year looks like as far as goal wise, because what tends to happen correct me if I'm wrong here as well in the comments, but what tends to happen is we get to January and all of a sudden we're like feeling whelmed about what are we going to accomplish this year? Or what didn't we accomplish this last year? And all of a sudden we're beating ourselves up about this, right? So let's not beat ourselves up when everyone else is. Let's just get ahead of things and realize you don't want to feel how you felt last year. This is probably a weird analogy, but I'm 40 now, so I'll just say it. But I now realize that certain foods make me feel away, right? Like I'm not, well, I was gonna say I'm not eating Cheetos all the time, although I still kind of am, but like I'm not feeling my 100% with certain foods. So it's like, I now know I'm not going to make the same mistake. And if I do, I know that I'm going to watch a movie and not feel guilty about it. So just start really to journal and learn about yourself. I think that can just really help. Okay. Even though, yes, we're here. The Millionaire Mindset is something that I wanted to give a really big discount on. It's not a giant course by any means. It's probably like 90 minutes at the most. This kind of portion is in it. And the reason why I built it was from my imposter syndrome. I hit like rock bottom at a time I was supposed to be celebrating a giant win, and I didn't. And so I had to work my way back. This definitely, it came with my coach, it came with me, it's all of this stuff. So it's a lot of real world techniques. But what I want to do is I want to stop sharing because I want to walk you through something. First of all, any questions? Do we want to talk about anything right now? Because we can. Okay, here we go. Anyone, we're good? All right, I want to do a 3-minute clarity check. I'm going to do this with you, okay? It is timed just because it's a webinar, but I want to do step 1 first, okay? So feel free, if you feel uncomfortable, turn off your cameras while you're doing this, whatever you want, right? But it's a safe place. So step 1, this is for a minute. I want you to sit very comfortably. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to take 3 deep, slow breaths. Sometimes, depending on how you feel, it might actually be more comfortable to feel grounded when you're standing. But feel focused on right now. I want you to really try to not think about anything else but right now. I don't want you to think about lunch, what you have to do after this, what you were supposed to do before this. Let's just think. For you to keep breathing big, stretch if you need. Let's give it 20 more seconds. Ready to repeat your affirmations. Okay. So, step 2, you have another minute. I want you to have your brain dump right now. But it's not about what you need to do necessarily. What I want you to do is jot down everything on your mind that is making you feel whelmed. Because we're no longer overwhelmed, we're whelmed. Don't censor it, don't organize it, don't try to control it. If you don't have a piece of paper, try to do a mental list, although I think mental lists are hard, maybe type it out. Okay. We'll give a minute here and just write everything that you're thinking about. Okay. All right, there's your minute. If anyone wants to share, feel free, but one last minute. I want you to look at this list and choose the one thing that you are going to focus on. And essentially think about what one thing would you make you feel most accomplished or relieved. Pick one thing, highlight it, circle it, whatever you want to do. One thing that would relieve you or make you feel accomplished that you could actually do today. So technically this wouldn't be a mega goal, right? But then maybe you could switch that into your micro goal that would lead into it. But as you're thinking about this, I'm going to give you another minute, is I want you now to look at that over and over again. And I want you to visualize taking steps, completing it, or even just starting it. Okay. This might be difficult for me. I actually brain dumped quite a lot. Okay. Okay. That's that minute. So how did that go? Does anyone want to share? Anybody at all? What are we going to do? I'll be vulnerable if nobody else wants to. Okay, I'm going to do it. I wrote all sorts of things. LinkedIn, sourcing, Christmas, Disneyland, lunch, webinar tomorrow, money, 2 friends of mine, my mom's wedding, my mom's renewing her vows, working out, snow, I'm going on my trip next week. I have rats that I have to put the traps out. Anyway, so I was going on and on. But my focus actually that I decided that I would feel really accomplished is I'm doing a webinar on how to hire in Series C tomorrow. And that's actually near and dear to me. And a reason why is because I've never sat in that internal seat. So I have a lot of questions. I see things from the outside. I have my opinions from the outside, right? But I've never actually had to sit in that seat where you're literally talking to the hiring managers and planning and you're talking to the CEO and all those things. So I have 2 really amazing women guests that are coming on. And I realized, you know what? I haven't really done the outreach that I want. I want founders in this. So I'm thinking, what am I going to accomplish today? So the moment I get off of this, yes, I'm having lunch because I'm hungry, but I'm going to do outreach for this, and I'm going to be very intentional about who sits in that webinar tomorrow. So that's mine. Anybody else want to share? No? Okay. Well, hey, Krista, that's all I had today. So I hope that everyone feels a little more comfortable with being whelmed. They know how to combat it. And I think the bottom line, in my opinion, is it's okay, right? It's okay. It's super normal. We all feel it. And it's just, I think, super healthy to talk about it. Because once you admit what's going on, that's the fastest way to push out of it. So thank you all today. Thank you, Talent Collective. Anything else, Krista?
No, just wanted to say thank you. It even just feels nice to like take a moment and close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. Like sometimes that in and of itself can help me reset and like almost think about the big picture. Like it's not as bad as I think it is, or you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like also, I just loved your tip about the like 5-minute walk in between meetings. I feel like that also helps me be really creative. Like that's when some of those ideas that I've been like shoving down because I'm doing too
Yeah.
many things come out. And then I get back to my desk. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write that thing down, right? So thank you. This has been just phenomenal, Brianna. Really appreciate you and your time, all of your expertise. So yeah, I hope everyone can connect with Brianna. I will send out a recording to this. I'll also get that discount code for the Millionaire Mindset, send that out afterwards. And of course, the ways that you all can connect with Brianna and myself. And if you don't know what Talent Collective is, we're a community for women in the recruiting space. We put on tons of great content just like this. We also have a mentorship program and peer groups, mastermind peer groups, and just a ton of other opportunities to connect with other women in our space. So feel free to connect with me if you're interested in learning more. And I hope everyone has a really great rest of your day. Now you can use this 7 minutes to check some
Yeah.
things off or go for a walk. How about go for a walk, everyone?
Go for a walk. Yeah, I thought about filling air. I'm like, you know what? I need to speak. We're done. We're good.
Go to the bathroom, grab a drink of water, do something.
Love it. Bye all.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.